Here follows an extract from my book Artful Designs, available from Amazon. Chapter 12, Part 1. Beth was in holiday mood, and the bright sunshine of the day added to the brightness that Beth felt. Although it was still only morning, she was already selecting clothes and jewellery for later that night. Her usual evening pupils had been reallocated to other slots, and she intended to spend the whole day preparing for the long-awaited dinner party. The full extent of her preparations actually amounted to weeks, if not months. They'd begun with an entire weekend in her pyjamas, cutting and sewing the meticulously designed and crafted outfit. The construction process had now come full circle as she sat once again in her pyjamas, stitching on a last-minute addition of some handmade lace tatting to the neckline of the dress she'd made. It was a bargain at a WI craft show and was the exact shade of vintage cream to coordinate with the colours of the dress and jacket she'd been so carefully working on. She insisted that she stay in pyjamas when dressmaking so as to be comfortable when crawling around for cutting and pinning, and also for ease of access when trying and fitting the garment. Drew knew that the reason was most likely to be that her thoughts were far too consumed with the project in hand to give thought to choosing commonplace, everyday wear. Admittedly, in this instance, she was still in her nightclothes because she was relishing a day off in the middle of the school term and had no intention of dressing until the time came to don the long-planned outfit she'd been labouring over for so many weeks. It was Conrad's birthday, and his wife, Hyacinth, was hosting what was bound to be a spectacular dinner party. It was a select guest list, with only 6 people dining. Theo and Sally would be joining Beth and Drew in dining with Conrad and Hyacinth. Hyacinth was pulling out all the stops and was bringing a professional chef into her kitchen. For as long as Beth had been designing and making her outfit, she had been meeting regularly with Hyacinth to discuss menus and table decorations. The firm that Hyacinth had hired would have dealt with all of these considerations, but Hyacinth had particularly wanted to attend to these matters herself. Because the staple matter of food was provided for, she could have free rein in the details of staging the table. Conrad was being indulgently generous, as he usually was with his wife. He adored Hyacinth, and he did his best to spoil her, which wasn't difficult, as she was easy to please. In this particular instance, he insisted that he wanted everything to be a complete surprise, and wanted Hyacinth to arrange matters entirely to her own taste, saying that he'd be sure to like it if that was the bargain. His only stipulation was that she should spare no expense and must forward all invoices to his secretary so that he had no inkling of what was afoot. Conrad had suggested the option of enlarging the guest list, but Hyacinth thought that quality was better than quantity in both menu and guests alike, so only their closest friends were invited. Beth was jolted from her quiet reverie as she stitched by the sharp tones of the telephone. Drew brought the receiver to her, explaining that it was Hyacinth who wished to speak to her. "Hello, Beth," said Hyacinth. "There's a bit of a hiccup in the proceedings tonight. The 2 waitresses that were due to attend tonight have been involved in a car accident. It's not serious, only minor injuries were sustained. However, they can't really be expected to work tonight. The chef says that all his regular staff are engaged elsewhere. He says that, at worst, he can approach an agency, but this could take time, and it's also a bit precarious as he can't personally vouch for who they might send. He wondered if we could suggest a couple of willing candidates. He can easily explain what they need to do. The most important things are that they are nicely presented, are pleasant, and can follow simple instructions. I immediately thought of Hetty and Emma. Would Emma be willing and able to help, do you think?" "I'm sure she'd be willing if she isn't too busy. Obviously, I can't offer to look after Primrose for her, so it depends upon if she's free and if Nat can look after Primrose. I'll call her straight away and ask. Have you spoken to Hetty yet?" "Yes, I have. She's quite keen if Emma is able to help. She said she'd quite enjoy a chance to try something different. I explained that of course I'd pay the going rate, and I understand that the chef will give them a meal. He said that there's nothing worse than serving delicious food when you're ravenously hungry and can't try what you're serving. He makes sure they get a taste in between serving. I'm sure that Emma would love to join in, especially if it involves a nice dinner and an evening with Hetty, even if she does have to look after us and clear up all of our dishes. I'll try her now and get back to you straight away. Don't worry, I'm sure we'll sort something out between us. You shall go to the ball. Hyacinth laughed and hung up so that Beth could call Emma. Of course Emma was keen to join in with the plan, and Nat was happy to stay home with Primrose. The scurry was then on to find a uniform. Thankfully, Beth didn't have to quickly sew up a black pencil skirt, as Emma remembered that her old youth orchestra uniform and a bow tie of Drew's finished the outfit. Hetty cobbled together a pair of black trousers, regulation funeral outfit, with a white shirt of Bobby's. The hunt was on for a second bow tie, but if one couldn't be found, it was a small concession which the chef said he'd overlook in this particular case, providing Hyacinth didn't mind and no photographs of the incomplete uniform were posted and linked to his website. He did have standards to maintain after all. It was typical of Conrad to celebrate his birthday by making sure that everybody else had a good time. He'd made sure that transport was provided so that his friends could enjoy his fine wines with a clear conscience. Although this merely meant that the local taxi firm would be doing the rounds, Hyacinth had maintained the tenor of the evening by stipulating on the invites that carriages would be at 7 and 12 midnight. Beth and Drew were ready and waiting when the horn outside sounded promptly at 7 o'clock. With a glass of exquisite white wine and canapes of tiger prawns and guacamole, or mushroom and white wine bruschetta, Beth stood in the vast lounge chatting merrily to Hyacinth and Sally. I hadn't realised that our circles overlapped. I didn't know that you two knew each other, said Beth. We've known each other for some time, on the fringes as it were, explained Hyacinth. Conrad has been on the committee of the Whitworth for years, and there's talk of him taking on the chair. However, it's this business of the theft that's really thrown us together, isn't it, Sally? I don't know what Theo would have done without Conrad. He's always been a vital part of the team, but he's been an absolute lifesaver recently. I bet he's utterly sick and tired of Theo calling him up at all hours to ask his opinion on this or that. And his marvellous business manner has smoothed things with the police amazingly, explained Sally. I don't think Theo would have coped if it weren't for Conrad's calm efficiency. Of course, it's obvious that Conrad has artistic tendencies, said Beth, whilst looking around her to add weight to her statement. The bespoke furniture, ornamental sculptures and paintings on the walls gave testament to this fact. But I didn't know that it went further than that. Years ago, when I first met Conrad, he did a second degree in art history at Manchester University. Over these later years, he's completed a master's with Edinburgh University, distance learning, of course, said Hyacinth. Goodness, your husband is a man of hidden talents. Is he contemplating a career change, said Beth. Oh no, replied Hyacinth. He always insists that this is for his own personal satisfaction. Conrad says that there's no money to be made in the art world, unless you're buying and selling great works, but he thinks that to do that is to sully beauty by reducing it to commerce. It's just a hobby to him, but one that he sincerely loves. Of course, you know of his spell in prison. Hyacinth blushed a little here, but gathering her courage, she pressed on. It was while he was inside that he really got back into seriously studying art history. He was bored once the prison accounts were done, and he had no desire to while away his days reading trashy novels. He decided to put time to the best use that he could and got his nose buried in the textbooks to fill some time. And we're reaping the benefits, exulted Sally. Theo is always saying how grateful he is to Conrad's input. We could never pay him for all he gives. His discernment mixed with his sound business sense gives immeasurable help, and yet he seems to think he should thank us for letting him join in. Well, I certainly thank you, said Hyacinth. You give him plenty to keep his brain occupied and provide us with something more pleasant to talk about instead of business, and you keep him out of mischief. The conversation can't have been particularly pleasant recently, not since the theft and the awful murder, said Beth. Any further discussion was curtailed as Henrietta entered the room. She rang a small silver handbell and announced that it was time to be seated. Her manner was reserved and quite proper to the occasion, but the twinkle in her eye and the smirk that was breaking around the edges of her mouth suggested that she was thoroughly enjoying acting the part. As the party walked into the dining room, Beth sneaked the opportunity to hastily whisper to Hetty, "You managed to get hold of a bow tie. Where did you find one?" "It was Bobby's dad's," Hetty replied. "Bobby remembered a box of bits and bobs that his mum kept in the spare room and found it buried in that. It was left over from a police charity function decades ago. It's a bit big, but his mum stitched me into it to make it fit. Goodness knows how I'll get out of it later." For the full book of Artful Designs, available in paperback or as an ebook, follow the link in the cards in the description box or find details on my website at sharonbill.com. Thanks for listening.